All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Dan Yuschick. This is my first time speaking in Helsinki. I actually just moved here from the States just 3 months ago. So pretty brand new, so thank you very much for having me. While this is still JavaScript related, it is a lot lighter than getting into web components and everything. I got into web development by way of web design and graphic design. So a lot of my own personal projects still relate heavily on design and animation. I definitely got onto the SVG train, and I like doing a lot of animation with that because it's a good way to combine my interest in design as well as my interest in actually bringing it all to life. So a lot of my personal projects end up revolving around recreating watches that I find inspiring. How many people wear the Apple Watch? Okay, not as many as I was expecting. All right, so I'm a big fan of mechanical watchmaking. So I follow a lot of my favorite watchmakers, and when they create a new piece that I really enjoy, I like to try and recreate that by using SVG and JavaScript. So one of the first pieces that I had done with that was actually a watchmaker from Helsinki here, Stepan Sarpaneva. And this was one of my first pieces, and it allows all the SVG funness of just changing classes and transitioning styles, so you could recreate all the different versions of that one watch. So built that, and then went into creating more pieces that have similar functionality but are just laid out a little bit differently. And then even went into a really obscure one from Resonance, where it uses all kinds of weirdness to tell the time. Even though these are 3 watches that are very drastically different, they were all fundamentally using the same logic of just taking the current time and rotating values based on that. So I started getting the idea of putting all this logic together so I can easily reuse it across projects. And the watch, my latest recreation that really drove this home is also from another Finnish watchmaker. Let's see. Is that going to refresh? No. Okay. Another watchmaker here, and what about this design made me start thinking in terms of classes and components was the fact that this is a dual time watch, where you have the primary dial that has the current local time, and then you have a secondary dial which functions independently but shows a second time zone. So again, this got me thinking about these are 2 dials that are using the exact same functionality but run completely independent of each other. So you can set the time and then set the time of the secondary dial as well. So these are 2 different things, but they're working off the same logic. So that got me thinking into, why don't I just create, say, a dial class and just instantiate it multiple times in the same design? And it is with that general concept that I began building out the library TickTock. Extremely niche library. I think it has like 7 stars on GitHub. This is the most fun thing I've ever built in my life. And that's why you get into development. It's fun. So as you see here, I have a bunch of different components that you can use. So we have calendar components, which you can use to display what's called a perpetual calendar. So you can show the day, the date, the month, or even the year and its relationship to whether it's a leap year or not. You have chronographs where you can actually time events down to 1/10 of a second, and everything will keep track here with various functionality of resets and flybacks, a whole bunch of stuff. Here you have the dials again that show 2 different time zones, day-night indicator. Probably my personal favorite is the minute repeater, and I don't think I can get sound to play on my laptop while I'm plugged in. Oh, yes I can. So you can actually, minute repeaters will actually audibly dictate the time to you, where it has one chime for the hours, a second chime for the minutes. Fun fact, in the movie theaters now, everyone has to turn off their phone. Back in the day, when minute repeaters were a big thing, people would go to the opera and they would have to tell people, do not check your watch while the opera is going on. We have advanced quite a bit. Yeah, and then moon phase, which I found a nice library online I was able to leverage, which will take the current position of the moon, translate that into a number, and then I rotate a disk X amount of degrees based on that number. And then ultimately the power reserve, which this one has run empty already. So once the power reserve runs empty, this watch stops working. So yeah, so that was a quick overview of TickTock. And again, I had fun building this site and putting through all the documentation and everything. So there's a lot of functionality here, a lot of options, a lot of things that you can cover, but I figured we could actually go through and keep with the theme of live coding and go through a quick little demo where we can build the first guide watch that we have here. So the first watch that I can show us building is a simple GMT watch. So it has 2 time zones, again, the local one and foreign time, and then we're going to have a power reserve as well. So while the kind of the API of TickTock is very simple, a lot of it is design driven, where it's very particular with how you lay out the watch initially. So I'm going to grab this SVG code that I already have optimized for this demo, and we're going to take a look at seeing how the SVG should look in its initial state. So don't need that twice, but we can save this. All right. Yep. All right. So how can we actually use TickTock? So let's bring over this. And then we're going to bring over our console, and I will zoom in on everything here. So first thing we want to do is we're going to add TickTock into our project. So we can just install this via Yarn. Very quick install there. And if we take a look at the package file, let me zoom in. Is that good? Cool. All right, so this is just a real quick package file I threw together so we can get some live reloading and everything going on and bundling. But yeah, just bringing in the TickTock library. So once we have that brought in, we can close this. And I'm going to cheat. I always have a reference open. So, all right. So we downloaded our optimized SVG. So we can just grab that. And this has all the styles and everything in line just to keep it very simple. And with that, we can just grab that SVG and drop it into a container here that I just have centering everything. So we save this. I'm just going to spin up a quick server here through Atom. Okay. So this gives us our initial state of the watch. So TickTock expects the hands and pretty much every element to be starting in their 0th position. So whether it's the minute hand, hour hand, second hand, everything is going to be set in its base, like 0 position. So whether it's like the moon phase dial or the date disk would start on 1 and the month would start on January. So a lot of that design stuff is implied through the library, Sometimes if you do it in reverse, I do have invert functionality in there. So if you want, say, the moon phase to spin the other direction, you can do that. But it is very centered on how you do the initial design. A lot of it is very dependent upon that. So we see here that we have all the hands starting, and even on the second dial, sticking straight up to the 12 o'clock. So now that we have our SVG here, switch back over, and let's close this for now. And let's actually bring TickTock into our project here. So, fun fact, I'm also a horrible typer, so I don't know why I still choose to do live coding, but just kind of bear with it here. And then we can just do log out watch. So currently we'll get an error about require not being defined. So I'm just going to run my Watchify, so that now when we save this and we switch back over, we see now that we're at least getting some response back from the watch class. Because that's how the whole library works, is you instantiate just the initial watch class, and based on the settings that you pass in, it pulls in the additional classes. So the dial is its own class, and it just instantiates a new instance of it. A moon phase is its own class, and it just instantiates a new instance of that as well. So everything about this is just class-based and is based entirely on the settings that you pass in. So we're going to create our first settings, and we're just going to create an object, and we can reference the docs and see that hey, we want to create some dials. So we can come to the dials and get an overview on stuff, and get a good introduction on what you can do and what to expect, what's required. So we want to define a dial. And we can do that by using the dials key, which is going to be an array, not an object just yet. And because we can, in this case, we're going to have multiple dials, we want to be able to pass in multiple objects of information. So we're going to name everything. And then this gets into the core of it. We're going to pass in the actual hand elements. So TickTock needs to know what elements it's going to animate. So if we look over in the SVG, we see here that, here we go. Here we have these elements with our ID tags. So all these IDs were created in Illustrator, and when they're exported out, just remain there. So we want to be able to animate the primary hands to tell the time currently here, and then we want to animate the secondary hands to tell the time probably in New York. So what we would do for this is we just pass in that ID as a string. So we have our primary second hand. And then we do the same for minute and hour. Okay. So this at least gets us started with creating our settings. But then we just need to create the new instance of our watch. So we can just say new watch and just pass in our settings object. So as we do this, we'll hopefully see some madness going on. Yes, we do. See the second hand kind of just like out of the way now. This is some fun transform origin stuff in CSS. So I'm actually just going to grab this from the guide, so I don't have to type all of it out. But if you go to the guides, I explain what's happening here. that SVG will rotate generally from the top left corner as its transform origin point. So we just want to update that to point at the center point of the dials. So don't judge me harshly for tossing this all inline in the file. I think you can all understand it's just a demo. So with that, this should refresh. And now we see here that the hands are rotating from the center point of the full dial. And just by passing in that small object, now we have these three elements telling the current time, right? So then we have other options that we can play with where, in that case, the second hand was ticking. I'd prefer to sweep, so it's more of a cleaner animation. So as to do that now, we see that the second hand will just cleanly animate and sweep across the dial. So then we can do the same thing for our second dial. And we're just going to change all this up to be secondary. And let's remove the sweep. So now we see here that our second dial is telling the time just like the first dial, but with the different functionality of the second hand. So one of the challenges with this was being able to easily create the new instances of a dial, but give it a different time zone to work with. Ultimately, I settled on including moment time zone to deal with this. So if we wanted to adjust our secondary dial to support a different time zone, we just pass that in, and then this is just pulling in the options from moment time zone. So we're just going to pull in New York, which should just be 7 hours behind us. So now if we refresh, it is, let's see, 7:30, yep, and it's just about 12:30 now in New York. So by including in moment with the library, it's very easy to just start jumping around between time zones. And what's great too is moment already took account of like, what is it, daylight savings and stuff like that, which I wasn't trying to write all of that code myself. If it's already done, don't reinvent the wheel. So with that, we have both dials working and telling the time in two different zones. So this brings us to our power reserve. And this is just an indicator that is exactly what it sounds like. As long as there's a reserve of power, the watch will run. If not, the watch will stop. So how we want to do that is to actually just pass in then our reserve property. And this will take two values. Again, it will take an ID. Power reserve hand. If we look through here, we should see, there we go. So here we have power reserve hand. And actually, I'll show the next property next. Then we're going to define what's called a range. And I'll get into explaining this. So the range determines how far the hand will move before it has reached its full power and before it has reached empty power. So originally, I explained that everything should be designed like sticking straight. Everything should just go straight up. So in this case, we're going to pass in a value of -90 as its empty point. So if we rotate the power reserve hand 90 degrees counterclockwise, that means it's reached its empty point. So it can't go any further. At that point, the clock stops. And then we also pass in a +90. So if we rotate it 90 degrees to the right, it will be full, and that is having full power then. So we define the range of motion. We say this is its ending point, this is its max point. So you could do this, you could design the hand at the empty spot and do 0 and 180. You could do that as well. I've just gotten in the habit of designing it right through the middle of the power reserve. So if we save that, we see here that the power reserve defaults to full power, right? Other watches I built, you can actually just wind the watch so it does actually increase the power reserve. And if we wanted to sit here all night, we could actually watch it slowly empty until the watch stops, but we can kind of speed that up so we can say 89. So this will say at 90 degrees it's full, but at 89 degrees it's going to shut off. So it should only take like a couple seconds. There we go. The power reserve is now empty and everything on the watch will stop. So the timeout that's running in the background there that keeps checking sees that the power reserve is empty, so it clears the timeout until it's wound again. And then once it's wound again, then it will start running from this current point. So that's the quick demo of TickTock. Like I said, I know it wasn't like super code heavy or anything, but it's something I just have fun doing. So very niche. If anyone wants to play with it, that's awesome. There are a few goals I have going forward with this. If we check out GitHub here, I keep an ongoing list of tasks that I'm hoping to achieve in the near future. So there's another type of chronograph functionality I'd like to include, retrograde hours and minutes, and a few things like this, updating the minute repeater, a whole bunch of things like that. This is the pure definition of a passion project. I just enjoy the art of watchmaking. I can't actually make a watch. This is as close as I can get. But it's actually led me to meeting a handful of the watchmakers that I've recreated here, because I'll send them the links and they'll really enjoy it. So it's been a lot of fun to do. So with that, I want to open up if anyone has any questions. I don't feel like throwing this too far.
Yeah. Okay, so I got two questions. First, can you tell March time?
March time? I don't believe so, no.
Okay, I'm waiting for that. I'll open an issue, okay?
There you go, open the issue, yep.
And second, will you have some sort of pro subscription service to ensure your watches doesn't run out of power,
That's in the works. Just do another issue. We'll figure that one out.
Thanks.
Yeah. Got one back here.
Or if I might
Yeah,
here.
go for it.
First things first, did you update iTerm?
Probably not, no.
You should do it. It's leaking stuff to do a DNS checks with your passwords and stuff, or anything it thinks is a link. So.
Good to know.
Or it should out in the future. Second is browser support.
So everything right now, it's being run through Babel down to ES5. So just including it into the project like that, you're going to be fine. Yeah, it's just like any other library that you'd bring in like that.
All right, and I don't know if you probably said, but I missed it, but the power drainage, like how quickly it goes, is that?
I actually forget exactly.
Was it seconds, or what was it based on? So.
I want to say it empties maybe like a quarter of a degree every second. So if you actually do a full 180 degrees, you have quite a few minutes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So, whoa.
Calm down.
Yeah. How old were you when you realized your love to watches?
It was actually only about like 8 or 9 years ago. I saw the first piece to me from Stepan Sarpaneva from here, and there was something about his design and aesthetics that really appealed to me, and I really got interested from there.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome work with the library.
Thank you.
What kind of use cases do you see, maybe outside of this really small group of people that really into watches?
Honestly, I don't know. If someone wants to like recreate like a Wall Street type of like stock exchange where it has like all the clocks on it or something like that. Like I said, it's very niche. It's built specifically to recreate watches. It could be, you know, for clocks, grandfather clocks and stuff like that as well. Given that it's just at the core, it's just taking time and then converting it into angles. I don't know how many other use cases there are for it, but that wasn't my big concern when starting this. It was just I keep writing the same functionality over and over again. I should just write something that make it easier for me.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to Finland, by the way.
Thank you.
First of all, you mentioned Illustrator. Is that your tool of choice for SVGs, or do you have anything else to recommend?
For now, I use Illustrator. I haven't really dabbled much in Sketch yet, but I feel like that is probably going to be a good option as well. But like Illustrator, well, like any kind of WYSIWYG editor, Illustrator is going to export out SVG code that's pretty bloated. So there's some really good SVG optimizers as well. So anything I edit in Illustrator, I take that code and just take it through an SVG optimizer as well, and then that's the product that I use.
Okay. Another question, since we're talking about a JavaScript library, how is the performance? Like if I want to have 1,000 watches on my web page, how does it perform?
I haven't actually done like any very like load heavy tests. I haven't really noticed any issues with running like 4 dials at one time, but obviously 4 is significantly less than 100, 200, and so you know, I haven't really looked at like the key frame or like the frames per second, but I haven't really noticed much issue just doing one at a time. So. Yeah, hey, I'm fine. Well, I'm fine with the open issues.
Anyone else with a question?
Back here.
I'm seeing you used a fixed pixel width and height for the clock. Is it, say, responsive or some sort, because you have to manually edit it every time you change the size? Right?
Yeah, so for this demo, I just have arbitrary values in there, but you could, I mean, the whole point of SVG is to be responsive, so this can scale responsively. Yeah, so as long as your actual like the CSS units, you're using explicit values instead of like center or top or something like that, because I know Firefox has issues with transform origin points in that regard. But even this watch, I think it was designed natively at 500 by 500. I have it scaled down to a different size, 300 or so. Still, as long as the CSS values for your transform origin are at the center point of what the watch natively is, those points will scale as well with the full SVG.
Okay. Another question: Do you have intention to implement different modes or different appearances of the watch, like the fancy watches you have in the code pens, for example? So, I mean, instead of downloading the separate SVG files, you can just load the JS file and then it's included inside. So it makes it more convenient, I guess.
So just kind of like package everything together.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely possible. So like on the demo site itself, that's pretty much how the base complications here are working on the main page. Is I just pass in whether I'm doing a dial or a chronograph or something like that, and then it just returns that block of SVG code, that block of settings, and it just instantiates a new watch with those settings. So, I mean, you can definitely package everything together so you can just download and run.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that you document your like niche passion project better than I document most production codes. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Oh, we got one more.
Please show the watches you showed at the start again, because they were really cool, and I want to take a picture.
Yes. Yeah, so this is the Sarpaneva Northern Lights. So this one has a moon phase dial, which you can actually just click to speed up to see how the whole galaxy goes, whatever. But the big thing about this is, yeah, it has the different variations of green and purple, and then it has a luminescence feature. So that one was a lot of fun to play with. This one is a German manufacturer, Elonge & Son. And this one was fun because the hours and minutes are actually split into multiple disks. So there's a disk from 1 through 9, or 0 through 9, and a disk from 0 through 6 for the tenths minutes and the individual minutes as well. So this one also has the power reserve. And all these watches as well, you can manually wind and set the time as well. Let's see. Except the resonance, this one has a weird mechanism that you have to update by the form. But this tells the whole, this is the date, so we can see here based on this dot that it's the end of Thursday. This line's Friday, and then you got Saturday and Sunday highlighted. This is a crazy unique way to tell the time. So you have the minutes on the outer dial. So if we'd update this to say, in the 30s, that's the outer dial, and the whole dial rotates with it. So this one was crazy to build. This one was crazy to build.
How many hours did it take for to build that?
The resonance probably took me about 30 hours. A lot of the challenge comes with the actual design process, especially this. It's hard to tell on the monitor, but this has a Gay-Lusche dial, so it has like a really intricate texture there as well. So that took a very, very long time. But then, yeah, this one, yeah, you can set the time and then focus on the secondary dial and set that as well.
Can you zoom in?
Yep. Should be able to. View, zoom in. I don't know why that's not actually working from the keyboard. But yeah, so on this watch, you're manually setting the time. TickTock will automatically bind those key events as well. And if you notice, when you click on the crown, it pops out a little bit. It also automatically binds active classes as well, so you can actually create like little animation effects for feedback. So a lot of stuff comes out of the box. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess we need to move forward.
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you very much.